All right, so welcome to session 5. It is Wednesday, August 24th. It is about 1847 Central Time. Guillermo, who is the Code Platoon pre-work instructor and also the individual who evaluates all of the applications, all of the Coder Byte challenges, was just in here speaking to us for about 40 minutes or so. Here is his contact info, and you can also always Slack him. He prefers that. Kind of the same as me. I've got my company email, the company that I'm contracted through is email, the company that company is contracted through email, a government email with my client, and then like my personal email. And then I've also got a Code Platoon email, and I try and keep all of those open throughout the day. But like the Code Platoon email isn't the one that's typically the one that I have like open and checking all day long. And I think I've got my Zoom set up to recognize hand signals here. So when I held up my hand, it raised my hand. Okay, let's not do that. All right. So tonight we're going to be talking about scope, and we talked about this a little bit or last week. Does anyone remember the two scopes? Yep, global and local. All right, so in JavaScript, scope refers to where variables and functions are accessible in your code. Global scope is any variable declared outside of a function is going to be in the global scope. You can access these variables anywhere in the program. Local scope is anything defined inside of a function is only accessible to that function and any function or blocks of code inside of it. All right, so this right here is the so Tom is declared at the global scope. All right, so it's assigned to the variable name, and we can return name. We'll see the output of Tom. And then if we put age inside of here, you can only get to it inside of the function. That is the local scope. So let's go ahead and I'll just go through this again real quick. All right, so we'll do, sorry, 5. All right, so if we say, did anyone hear my cat screaming at me?
No.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Zoom's got pretty good noise filtering. So, but he came in and stood in my doorway and yelled at me. So, all right. So let name equal Charles. All right, and this is global scope. Oops, don't need to do that. We need to do this. All right, so we got that. And same thing, if I create a new function here and say const name, right? So here we are, and we can do this too. We'll just say right. And now if we do something in local scope, so call it. Right, so we get to Jeff there, but now if I console.log local name, and I'm not giving it a function call, so it's not finding the function. Actually, I'm sorry, it's a bad naming, so I will cause a collision there. Let's do this. Let's say you now it will throw the error. So local name is not the function, right? So this is inside of my function. I cannot get to it outside of my function. And so this is local scope. And in general, we want everything to be as local as possible. And the reason being is that when we do something at the global scope, more things can touch it, and we don't necessarily see where or when it happens, right? So again, because everything is in the same file here, like it all becomes very apparent. But if I take name and reassign it to the value of the number 2, right? See how up here, so I come in, I instantiate the variable name, assign it the value of Charles. I console.log out name. My function is right here, so this gets loaded into memory. The computer is aware that it exists. I'm reassigning the value of name to the number 2, and now I'm calling my function. So just because the function is over before this, it still doesn't happen until this happens, right? So now if I've got this in index, and let's say I've got a second thing that's number or change name to number.js, and this is reaching across and changing it, and I never see it, it becomes very difficult to find out where something went wrong. Versus if in here, nothing can reach Jeff that's not inside this function where I can readily see it to change Jeff to a different value. Right, so that's why we want to try and maintain as much as possible at a local scope. Now, there will be times where we need to use global scope. There may be values that need to be used across multiple functions, especially if we're displaying data, right? But in general, if it does, like, we should always check to make sure that it needs to be a global scope. And if it doesn't need to be a global scope, we should make efforts to turn it into a local scope. All right, now hoisting is a interesting concept, but it's nothing that you need to fully understand to get into or get through code platoon. And basically what hoisting is a JavaScript mechanism where variables and function declarations are moved to the top of their scope before code execution. And this is, so basically what this is saying is that like if we do this here, so this is also replit. So if we do console.log name here, and let's see here, we've got a reference error here, so we can get rid of this one. This will cause a reference error. Local scope. Right. So this slide should probably be updated. What it's saying is that if I run this before this, that I should get undefined. It actually will cause a reference error. However, if you assign, like if you have a variable that's unassigned, you'll get it. And I don't know if that's because I'm running let versus var. Let me try that once here real quick. Okay, so var you can basically var, which I never knew that, quite honestly, and we don't really use var anymore. But when you do var, like if I do letter const, we were getting an error, a reference error, saying that that doesn't exist yet. When we do var, it's basically saying something like this. Right, and so right, and we only get that with var, we don't get it with let and const. Again, this concept doesn't really make a difference, and you should write code in a manner that you don't necessarily depend on this. Like you shouldn't be calling things before they exist, especially with modern syntax, because you are just going to throw reference errors. All right, so it is 7 o'clock. That is it for the stuff that we talk about tonight. Were there any questions about scope or hoisting?
Well, I mean, if you're saying we don't really use var anymore, you usually use let and constant, what's the whole point of using hosting now anymore? If it's not going to work with constant let.
So hoisting goes past that. It also has to deal with functions, and it's more, and right, older software, but also it's more of just this is how JavaScript works. And again, like I prefaced it, like if you never think of hoisting ever again, like you don't need it to make it through this class or through code platoon.
Okay, so it's just another part of JavaScript that we should be aware of, but not. All right.
Yep. No, again, hoisting is more of a concept that you run into when you start writing longer files, and pretty much every challenge, well, every challenge that you will solve in this class can be done inside one function. Now there are examples of maybe turning it into 2 or 3 functions, like a main function and a couple of helper functions. And so Guillermo has talked about high order functions. I don't think we've covered that yet. Yeah, that's actually tomorrow's class. But and all a higher order function is a function that either takes any function, another function as a parameter, or returns a function in its return statement. But yeah, you do not need to know about hoisting to solve the problems on this in this class. All right, so any other questions here? Okay, then let's go ahead and pull up the list of challenges. So we did caffeine. I had mentioned that some of these in here are a little rudimentary. I do encourage you to try and tackle them. I mean, for instance, can I go to the bar? Right? Write a function that takes a number argument and returns a Boolean if the person is of age to enter a bar or not. Right? So all this is something like this. right? True. If there are only 20, false, right? So this is just an example of using a ternary. So not like anything that we need to split the class up into and take any significant chunk of time with. I can drop it at like the solution in there, but a lot of these, so can I go to the bar? What's your grade is basically, can I go to the bar? But there's more, it's a if else statement instead of just a if else statement. Cold enough should be about the same thing here. Right, so if the temperature in Chicago drops below -4 degrees Fahrenheit, school will be canceled. Write a method that takes a temperature in degrees Fahrenheit and returns a Boolean. True if school, so you literally, instead of just doing 21, we're doing -4, and we're going to return true or false out of there. So fairly straightforward control flow at that point. However, we can take a look at Fizzbugs. Now, as a class, would you like to break up into groups of 3 or so and take a stab at this on your own, or would you like me to walk the class through it?
Jason says he wants to whiteboard it now.
Jason, you wanna solve the problem for the class?
Sure.
Okay. So what I would ask, and I don't know if you're on multiple monitors or not, but if you are, you can pull your solution so you've got your notes off to the side or whatever. But just go in there, and I'll drop the Fizzbuzz link here again real quick, and create a blank REPL or a blank IDE file. And if you can walk through your solution for that, we will let you take it. And then if you get stuck or hung up, or you need, like, because again, this is your first time doing it in front of a crowd, it is very different than doing it on your own time. Feel free to ask for help, and I'll jump in wherever needed. Let me stop my share. And I'm also, are you okay being recorded, or do you want me to turn off the recording for this part?
No, that's fine. I just need to get ready here.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to allow other people to screen share. All right, so you should be able to share whenever you're ready.
Okay, so everybody sees my screen.
Yep, you're good to go, man.
All right, so I use this. I solved it using an object. So I'm just going to console log the function. Fizzbuzz. A little nervous here, so that's good though, right? All right. So the first thing that I did is I declared or instantiated a constant my object to an empty object. Constant my object to the empty object, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a for loop through the number. So if it's 100 in this scenario, it's going to for loop through 1 to 100, and then basically we don't push to an object, but the same idea. Every time we go through that iteration, it's going to, if it meets the parameters of the, we're going to push to that object essentially. So first thing I did was did a for loop. Just did a basic. So let I equal 1, and the reason we're starting at 1 is because of 0 indexing. If we started at we said let I equal 0, the first thing that's going to pop in there is 0, which that's not one of the numbers that we're going to try and iterate through. So, and then I less than or equal to num, so we get that 100. Or the last, whatever the number is. So if we just did the less than num, it's just going to go to 99. So and then I plus plus. And then I think the first thing that we need to do is if it equals 3 or 5, or it's divided by 3 or 5, we need to knock that out first. So the Fizzbugs, because I think if we did the divided by 3 and then the else 5 and then did the 3 and 5, then we wouldn't get the return that we wanted. So if we're doing the iteration, not the number, because it's going to iterate through and then basically push up to that object. So if I divided by 3 equals 0 and I divided by 5 equals 0. And this is where we want to put my object iteration equal to is fuzz. And then you could do it like I know that some people do a couple of just if statements. For this class, I'm just going to do the if else, because I think that's what we want to make sure that we maintain proper syntax. So if it's just divided by 3, again, my object iteration equals is. And then we got to solve for just if it's divided by 5. So the same thing, else if I divided by 5 or modulus 5 equals 0. And then my object again. Was fuzz. And then the last thing we have to do, so if it doesn't meet any of these parameters, we have the else, which is just going to return the iteration for that. So in this scenario, the else would be the first thing that it looks at, because 1 is not divided by 3 or 5. So it's just going to return 1 equals 1 essentially. We're just going to return the my object iteration. And the last thing we have to do is just return the my object empty object. Return my object. So hopefully it works. There we go. What it started at 3.
So first off, awesome job. Look at line 12 and how is that different than 10 and 8? Are you assigning a value here, or are you just creating a key?
Oh, it should be the I. I'm sorry. There we go. My bad.
Cool. And again, awesome job. This is a correct solution. This is what we're looking for. One other thing here that we could possibly do to clean this up a little bit. But if something is both divisible by 3 and divisible by 5, what else is it divisible by? I don't know the math term, lowest common denominator, greatest common factor, whatever it is. But what do you get if you multiply 3 times 5?
15.
Right. So anything that's divisible by both 3 and 5 would be divisible by 15. And so we could clean up our logic there a little bit and remove the and only have the single check.
So you're saying if it's,
Yeah, so if something is divisible by two things, it's also divisible by those two things multiplied by against each other. Yeah, so triple equal. Yep. So this should work as well.
Oh, yeah, because if you notice, every 15, you get Fizzbuzz.
Yep.
Okay.
So, and then do me one little favor, right next to console, just to the left of it, go ahead and click the cleanup button. Cool. And then, yeah, so this is good to go. And then if you want to drop your, well, so so, and again, this is the exact, right here, this is the exact same solution I would show you. There are a couple of pitfalls that we didn't get into because we did it correctly right from the get-go. So again, excellent job, Jason. That takes a lot to get up in front of class, and excuse me, you're the first person in 4 or 5 times that I've taught this now that's actually done live code. So
I think the reason why I wanted to do it is because I have done the assessment, the live assessment with Guillermo, and what he said holds very true to me. When I started, when he gave me my first question, I froze. So because yeah, you do lose half of what you learned once you start putting yourself up against somebody who is evaluating you.
Yep. Yeah. And so again, in like Fizzbuzz, like I said, this is a very famous entry-level challenge. When I graduated from Code Platoon and I had to interview at a bunch of companies, I remember one of the interviews I went in, and one of the developers at the company walked in and sat down with his computer and handed me his computer and sat next to me and said, okay, here's the problem. We're going to code a imaginary village where each family has their own hut. Each hut will have a child each year, and if they have a female child, they will have a child again the following year. If they have a male child, they stop having children, and there's a 50-50 chance that it'll be male or female. Now code this using object-oriented programming for me. And like, not only having to write code with someone more senior to me that I had never met in my life staring over my shoulder, I was doing it on their computer. So it wasn't a computer that I was familiar with using or a keyboard or anything like that. And it can be panic inducing. But at the end of the day, it's not that terrible. Now, all day long, I write code in like Zoom meetings. We use different, we don't use Zoom, we use a competitor, but I'm writing code in front of clients. I'm writing code with my colleagues that some know way more than me, some know way less than me. And like, I'm explaining my way through it. Like we're digging, we're trying to find these things out. But this is like, it's that you get over your fear through exposure to it. And so again, hats off and taking the leap and doing it in front of class. Like I said, the first time I taught this class, I think like the first 2 or 3 sessions I was fine, and then like session 4 or 5 I tried to code something and it was not working for me, and like by the time I was done doing it, I probably needed like a paper bag and a 15-minute break. So it's not fun when things don't go the way you want it to when you're coding in front of a group. You can stop sharing now. And let's see here. So let me share my screen again. All right, so And the only thing that I would do differently here with Fizzbuzz is, and again, perfect solution is I'm going to show you like one of the pitfalls that you can fall into something like this. And Jason got it right off the bat. But if we were to work through this, and I like Guillermo's the acronym, the PREP, right? It's basically what I've been doing, right? So like we look at parameters, I call it input, right? We have one input. It's going to be a number. And we have one output, so that's our return. Which if we look at the README here, and again, spot on, right? We're not just returning the numbers, we're actually putting this inside an object, and then we're returning the entire object, right? So Fizzbuzz test interview question designed to help filter out 99.5% of programming job candidates. 99.5% sure that's just a made up number. The text of the program assignment is following something similar to this. Write a program that prints an object. So prints an object with a number of keys. The key is the number, and the value is either the number fizz, buzz, or fizzbuzz. But for multiples of 3, assign the keys a value equal to fizz, multiples of 5, buzz, and for numbers which are multiples of both 3 and 5, assign the keys values equal fizzbuzz. Otherwise, assign the keys value equal to the number, right? And so if we were to work through this, we're going to have an object, and right. And one thing I don't do a lot is write the pseudocode before the challenges, but we can console.log num. All right, so we know that that's going through there. And so now we can say let equal our empty object, and we can say if num right? And so this should only happen when we hit 3s. Whoops, undefined because I'm not returning my object. If num, sorry, because I did not put us in a for loop. Okay, so what did I mess up here? Save me, Jason. Got my object I equals fizz.
I mean, that right there looks good to me. I'm not sure.
My object.
Wouldn't you need to change instead of the num modular 3? Wouldn't it be I modular 3 because you're inside the 4?
Oh, yep, that's correct.
Yes. Sorry, you're absolutely correct. So what I was doing was 100 or 50 times. I was just basically doing the number 50 modulo 3, 50 times. So thank you very much for that. All right, there we go. All right, and so All right, so now we've got our 3s and 5s, and people's natural tendency is kind of to try and work in order, right? So read this, okay, 3s are fizzes, 5s are buzzes, 3s and 5s are fizz buzz. And the trap that we fall into is right here. Right, so now when I run it, notice how I never get to fizz buzz here, right? So because 15 is also remainder 3 equals 0. So it hits the first condition that it can, right? And it doesn't continue to hit the other ones. And so a lot of people get to this point and they get confused or they panic because things aren't working, right? And this is where we talk about like how our control logic needs to be in the correct order, right? And so I could say else right? And this won't fix it, but this is the complete thing. So they'll get to here and they'll say, okay, I don't know why I'm not getting fizz buzz. And it just comes down to, again, it's the order that you do it in. So if we put the 15 up here and the 3 down here, and these two don't intersect with each other. So these ones don't necessarily matter which one you do, right? But this will now be a correct answer. And the only other thing, and don't, yeah, so let's see if we could do, I don't know if this will actually do anything or not, but no, it won't. Okay. So I think that's just an artifact of the way that they typed up the README where they show the numbers here. But when we get our output, these are strings, and I don't really care one way or the other why they're showing up as a string versus a number. Okay, so against what many think, JavaScript object keys cannot be number, Boolean, null, or undefined type values. Object keys can only be strings. So this is, whoops, a lie. Which is also, if no one's clicked on that yet, when you do have a lot of code and you're trying to keep track of things, all of these arrows will condense, and they're based off of the, like, whatever block of code you're looking at, right? So this one right here does the entire for loop. This one does the entire function. So if you're writing multiple functions and you don't need, and say you've got something up here you're trying to read, and this pushes you off the screen, you can always condense down different parts. I don't know if there's, it doesn't look like there's an open all, but and then also with Replit, like if you start digging deeper, these little dots over here is like basically if you start to get into debugging through the Replit, which we won't cover in this class at all. Debugging is something you'll get into once you get into Code Platoon. It's not anything you need to know to get into Code Platoon. All right, so again, Jason, outstanding job. You can see his answer is the exact same one that I would have went for. I just wanted to show you like the little example of it is important that your control flow is in the order that it needs to be in. All right, so that is it for Fizzbuzz. And so let's go ahead and take a look here at what's next. Fizzbuzz was right here. So again, I'm pretty sure blackjack is nothing special. It's just if you enter something in, like, well, actually, blackjack's not too bad because it is asking you to program some rules. But again, this is the same thing as going to the bar or really Fizzbuzz, where instead of just having 2 cases, you're going to have multiple cases, right? So if the sum of the cards in the hand is less than 15, return hit. If it's between 15 and 21 inclusive, return stand. And if the sum is greater than 21, return bust. And you're just feeding in the number. So again, this is fairly basic. We've done this multiple times at this point. It's just basic control flow that you can handle with an if, else statement. And let's see here. So detention, I believe this is a good one, because this one makes us search a little bit. All right, so all of the students in 5th and 6th grade have detention. You can tell a student is in 6th grade if 6 is the highest number in their student ID. If the highest number in their student ID is less than 6, they are younger, and if it's greater than 6, they are older. The same rule applies for 5th grade students. Write a method that takes in a student's ID as a string of unknown length and returns a Boolean true if that student has detention, or false if they do not. This one's a fun one. All right. So with this one, should have remixed it. I'll go, I don't paste, copy, and where did chat go? Here. All right, so I'm going to drop that in. It is 7:31. I want everyone to take a 5 or 6 minute break. And then, but I want before you take that 5 or 6 minute break, I'm going to assign everyone into breakout rooms. And then same rules apply here for the breakout rooms. I'm going to do this one in, let's see here. So 5 breakout rooms. So that's going to be everyone in a group of either 3 or 4. So I'd like one person to share. If you're sharing, please don't have already solved the problem. Let someone else on the team do it. But I mean, feel free to chime in and help guide people through it. And I will check in on the rooms. But basically what I'm going to do here is I am going to send everyone to the breakout rooms. Like I said, take about 5-6 minutes. So 7:32 to 7:38. Get some water, take a bio break if you need to, and then get back to it. And then if you solve it, please Slack me just so I know who has and hasn't solved it yet. And then, but at the latest, I would say around 8:05, I'll pull everyone back in to go over a solution. I'm going to stop recording right now, or pause the recording. Okay, welcome back. So it is a little after 8 here. Hopefully everyone got a chance to take a break and take a stab at the problem. So we're doing the have detention, which is basically all the 5th and 6th graders have detention. we're going to get their student ID, and we can determine if a student is in the 5th or 6th grade by the highest number that is in their student ID. So this first case would be true. This second case would be false because this student would be in the 7th grade, right? So we've got 3, 6, and then we've got 3, 6, 7. So a 6th grader and then a 7th grader. All right, so when we take a look at this, we're going to this. And I also see that Guillermo dropped in the intro to coding, the prep, and some links, some resources. So we've got it looks like you got this from someone by the name of Leon Knoll. So they run a YouTube channel, but we've got parameter return example in pseudocode. So in plain English, write out the steps you use to solve the problem. Just all bullet points will be enough. So link to Code Wars. Yep. So the Inky, the note cards, and then like you said, don't hesitate to reach out to them. All right. So let's go ahead and do this. So we can say P is, so for parameters. All right, so we're going to get one input, which is a string, right? And then we've got return is going to be Boolean, right? Either true or false. They are in the 5th, 6th grade. Right, so for an example, see below, right? We've got a couple of examples right down here. And then for the pseudo code, no idea if I spelled that right. We can do some bullet points, right? So let's go ahead and walk through this step by step. So we are going to get a string. Containing numbers and letters. We need to isolate each element by splitting nudge, nudge, hint, hint up the string into individual elements to be examined. We will then need to check each element to see if it is a number. If it is a number, we need to determine if it is the largest number so far. Once we check each element, we need to check to see if the largest number is equal to 5 or 6. If so, return true, else return false. All right. So is this pretty clear to everyone? Am I missing anything? Is there something anyone would have a question about with what I've typed out so far?
Seems pretty straightforward so far.
Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and get to work. Let's take it a step at a time. All right. So first thing I'm going to do is return ID and hit run. So there are my strings. All right. And so now I'm going to return ID.split. This isn't quite what I want. how do I get each individual element or each character into its own element?
Yeah, put the quotations in the
Now,
parentheses.
so just an empty string in here. And now I'm splitting on each one. All right, now there's a couple of different ways to do this here, right? So now I know that I need to iterate. So I could say for let I equal 0, I less than, we'll do this. Let's say let ID array equal ID dot split. ID array dot length I plus plus, and now we can console.log ID array I. All right, so now I'm getting each individual character. All right, so now I have a string, or I'm still in a string. So I'm going to be looking at the different values here. Now I only want to look at the strings that can be converted to numbers.
Quick question, Charles.
Yes,
Why
sir.
is there undefined? What's causing that?
Because I'm not returning anything from my function,
Oh, okay, I got you.
right? So right, so that gets
I see.
so because remember console.log is not return. And before I was returning up here, and because when I return, I'm already wrapped in the console.log. And same thing here, when I don't return anything, it's undefined, but I'm still console.logging it, so I'm just sending undefined to the console. All right, so let's see here. What I can do then is maybe something like this. All right, so I can say parse int array ID I. Now I would expect to see either a number or what is G going to turn into?
Not a number.
Not a number.
Not a number, right? So I should see numbers and nans. Sweet. So everything turned gold. 1, not a number, not a number. 3, 6, 1, 3, 6, 7. All right. So now it looks like I have isolated my numbers. Right. So I don't necessarily need to console.log this. But so let's see here. We are getting a string containing numbers and letters. We need to isolate each element by splitting them up. We've done that. We will then need to check each element to see if it is a number. We've done that. And now we need to see if it is the largest number we have so far. So now I need something that is going to tell me if I have the largest number. So largest number equals 0, right? We'll start it off at a neutral place. Now we can say something like if parseInt I, right, is greater than largest number, largest number equals ID array I. Right? Else largest. In fact, actually, I don't even need the else here. We'll just leave this off. All right, so now only if it's larger, we're going to come in and take a look at it. Why are we yelling at it? Expression expected. Array I, parse int. Oh, I think I've got one too many things here. How about this? That's happy. All right, so now I can return largest number. Right, so I get a 6 and a 7. Now that's not what's asking me, so that's not what it's asking for, what the largest number is. Now I can use that to basically do another conditional logic to see if it is going to be equal to 5 or 6, right? So I can say if largest number here is triple equal to 5, or largest number is triple equal to 6, return true, else return false. Oh, and we got a false. So somewhere in here, I did something wrong. All right, so I've got my for loop, there's my if. Log largest number.
Is number still a string? Our largest number still a string?
It is still showing it as a string, so you are correct. Because even though I'm parsing it in here, and good pick up there, this is printing in white, I did not do the same thing here. So there's my true, there's my false. I can add a bunch of stuff in here. All right, still get the true. If I throw a 9 in here, all right, I get false. All right, so that would be my first pass at this problem. And there's definitely some areas where we could look to clean some of this up. So let's go ahead and take a second pass at it.
So, Charlie, I got a question for you.
Yes.
In like the real world situations, like when you first you first get hired, you junior developer, like how deep into like how the code looks are they expecting? Are they expecting you to have all the fours in the new, for loops in the new way, or is it pretty much like they're kind of expecting the way the code is written here, and then as you go on, you learn better ways to tighten it up?
So, right, they're expecting for you to know the appropriate building blocks to use. And you may write a for loop and they may come back and tell you that you need to use a dot map here, a dot for each here. But also there is, as a junior developer, if you're just writing code and then merging it into an application, there's something wrong where you work. And I'm not saying that you won't necessarily end up at a place like that, but even our most senior developers are, when they write code, it's still peer reviewed, right? So, and a lot of your learning as a new developer should come from code review, right? Where a more senior developer is going to read through your code and leave you notes for call out things you did well, but also leave you notes on things that can be done better. And that may be something what we refer to as non-blocking, where like, hey, next time you do this, maybe take this stab at it, or blocking where you need to fix this before you're allowed to merge this code into the code base.
All right, yeah, that makes sense. All right.
Right. And that's why I try and show things iteratively, not just like bang, here's the solution. I try and draw it out step by step, and then once I've done it, like I said, it's make it work and then try and make it look a little bit prettier. And so what I would do here, and so here's kind of a hack. So let's take all of the, well, we can leave largest number, but let's go ahead and comment all of this out. So first off, we can do console.log ID array here. Right, and there's my two of strings. So I can do dot map number. And now I've converted everything. Right, so instead of having to do like the parsant here and then the parsant here, I've already, just by doing a dot map, converted everything into a number. Right, and then let's see here. So now I need to, so basically I've done that part, and now I can do ID array dot for each number greater than largest number.
Wouldn't number have to be capitalized or the
Mhm.
first letter?
No, because this is like doing an I, this is like doing I in an I loop. So this could be, like I said, turkey sandwich if I want it to be, right? Like it doesn't help. And I can use something other than numbers. So I can say like num to check, right? If the number we're checking is bigger than the largest number is equal to num to check, or just largest number, right? And so now if we canceled out, oops, we already canceled out logging to the largest number, right? 6 and 7. And so now we've basically replaced this whole for loop right here. And now we just need to return our true or false. And so we can get rid of this, and we can say return oops, largest number, didn't put cap in there. All right, and I get my true and false. And so now the rest of this is gone as well. And the only other thing, and again, I don't know that this would make it better, but I might be able to do something like this. And I don't know if this will work or not. And I'll have to put the largest number above where it was referenced, right? And so I can say ID dot, well, leave the split there. Map dot for each this, and I get true false, right? So now I've taken all of this and basically just moved it into built-ins and returning it in a and then like using some ternaries instead of if statements just to make my my function terser. And honestly, like I like the for loop probably better than I like this. And I definitely like the dot map and the dot for each separated, just because it makes it easier when you're reading it as a human to figure out what's happening at each step. But this would be about as terse as it gets right here. Let's see here. So there's a couple of questions here. So, hey, Charles, a lot of this when live makes me feel overwhelmed. Any advice on things to do to get better at reading syntax besides trying to code actual problems? Seems like I'm trying to understand what you're typing without even thinking about the actual code program or the code or programming. Yeah, so this is natural. Each night you'll feel overwhelmed that we do this. You will go to Code Platoon and you will feel overwhelmed for the first probably 6 or 7 weeks of the course. However, you will be overwhelmed by new things, right? Like this is overwhelming. This is, and it's these get more difficult, right? In the order that we go. But if I were to come back to you and say, do rectangle 2, right? On the first night where you've never written a function before, or never done anything like that. And now I came back and asked you to write a function that basically takes 2 numbers and does like an area formula, right? So write a method that takes in 2 number arguments representing the length and width of a rectangle and returns the area of the rectangle, right? So what's the area of a rectangle? Length times width, right? So write me a function that returns 2 times 3, right? Like, so at that point, I would hope that that would not be something that overwhelms you anymore, right? Like that you could sit down and reasonably do that within a few minutes. And so the fact that like I'm like detention is probably one of the first things that we worked on that's truly multi-step, which is why I had you work on it on your own, right? Because even Fizzbugs, all we're doing is taking, we're going through, we're using a loop and we're going through control flow. We're using if-else statements to make decisions for us, and we're just doing the same thing over and over again. With this, we're coming in, we're having to take a string and manipulate the string into an array, and then we're kind of writing our own hand-rolled filter algorithm using some control flow and a loop, right? And then we're using more conditional logic, more control flow, an if-else statement, a ternary statement to determine if our, sorry, one sec, let me shut this. If we're hitting our, the condition that we're looking for, if they're in the 5th or 6th grade or not, right? So this is the first truly like multi-step problem that we ran into. And from here on down, like there may be some easier ones, but they're going to be very similar to something like this, right? So we've got camel case, right? So when we start getting into arrays and loops, 2 strikes, sum of negatives, initials, range is a fun one. That's where you give it 2 numbers and you build a range in an array, right? But they're all going to be building on each other and you're going to be doing the same things over and over again. So I expect that you looking at this is overwhelming, but by the time next week rolls around and we do something like this, it still may not be easy, but this shouldn't be worse than this. All right, so a lot of it is just going to be doing the repetition. And I think, like I said, like I always throw out free code camp. It sounds like Guillermo's a big fan, excuse me, of Code Wars. And that's for, and those of you who haven't signed up for Code Wars yet, I think I even have an account there. I can't remember. And I think with Code Wars, like Code Platoon, right, has a like a team or whatever that you can join, and like they track your dojo, and you can go in here and answer like challenges. So like I think I was doing some in like Ruby, right? Practice, freestyle sparring, home opportunities, leaderboard, practice, right? So sum of intervals, typing series, like all of these, right? So we can pick JavaScript, Java, right? And then we can say approved, progress, and training, right? I don't know if there's, right? So we can sort by easiest. So we can sort by easiest, there's 5,519 katas for you to do, right? And you can start with the easiest ones, so which are like the 8th level. And Guillermo was saying that like he would hope to see you like on the 7th level by the time you roll into code platoon, and if you're at the 6th level, that you're definitely ready to jump in, right? And I mean, when looking at the 8th level here, right, I'm sure there's going to be like out of those 5,200 or 5,500, like probably a good 400 or 500 or 1,000 of them are going to be like at the easiest level, right, where you're going to be able to go through. I mean, I'm still scrolling through here, we're still all 8th level stuff here, right? And so, and it's just going to be, and you don't have to do all the 8th levels to start the 7th level, but I mean, knock out 5 or 10 or 20 of the 8th levels, and if it gets boring, then yeah, the bro Joe, then you like don't keep doing ones that are boring, like challenge yourself, move to that 7th one. And as you're learning, everything should be hard. Like if something is impossible, you're not ready for it yet, right? Like you're like if you're just like completely blown out of the water, you're not doing yourself a favor by spending time on that. But there are smaller steps that you can take so that you can still like not be bored, you can still challenge yourself, you're still learning new concepts. And then once those become boring, once you've got those ones mastered, then you take your step to the next level. Like I said, you knock out 10 or 20 8th levels and they're boring, and you jump to a 7th level, either it's going to be a little difficult and you're going to muddle your way through it, or it's going to blow you out of the water. And if it blows you out of the water, go back and do another 10 or 20 8th levels, because maybe you weren't as comfortable as you thought you were, or you just got some random ones that weren't that tough. But all of this is just going to be repetition. Is that a good answer for you, Jesus? Okay. Yep, no problem. And so then we've got, how long did it take you to be able to read a problem that you have to solve and be able to know what functions, etc., that are you going to need to use? So that varies, right? Like, I mean, there's still stuff that like I have no idea what's going on with it, right? Like when I go to work, there is stuff that like my principal level developers that I work with are doing that is still like a total mystery. Like I have no idea what the heck they're doing. And I try and read some of their code and it makes my eyes bleed. But like for like these things, you gotta remember, like I went through Code Platoon over 3 years ago now. And this is like, I never remember the exact amount of times, but this is my 4th or 5th time teaching this class. So these are all like things that I've seen before. And like I said, like when I came back and taught this class after being out of boot camp for a year and a half, I had to relearn a lot of these things, right? Because I didn't know the difference between like a for each in a map and couldn't explain them clearly. And like I didn't know what a for in or a for of loop was really used for. And so those are all things that I had to read up on. But also, like I can also tell you that, and you see these, right? Like, so like when I pull detention control flow, where's mine? I do this, right? So this is saying 2. So this is the 3rd time that I've pulled this one down, right? And so I could look at detention control flow 1 and detention control flow, and I can see my previous solutions that I gave to other classes, and everyone can pull my old solutions as well, right? So like you can type in, say like session 3, right? So there's the April 28th one. So here's ours. Let's see here. So there's session 3 from May of 2021. Right. So you can see like the previous times that I taught this course, and you can go back and look at some of my solutions. And my guess is like when I taught this the first time, like I did not come up with a solution that was this terse. Like my solution probably looked a lot more like this, and that was my final answer. Right. But as I do these over and over again, kind of knowing the building blocks that I have to play with, like I'm able to assemble what would be referred to as like more elegant solutions. All right, any other questions on this stuff? Anything at all? Okay, so let's go ahead. It's 8:38. We're gonna knock out one more challenge tonight, and I will lead the class in that. Let's go ahead and take a look here.
Thank God, because I tried figuring this out. I couldn't.
This one in particular, the rivers.
Yeah.
Great, now I'm sweating. Well,
Nah,
here.
it's probably very easy. Yeah, I just don't.
I can always go look back at my old answer if I need to. All right. So write a method that takes in a river velocity as an integer and a boat type as a string. Rowboats can only navigate in waters under 3 miles per hour, otherwise they crash. Similarly, sailboats can navigate under 7 miles per hour, and ships can navigate under 15 miles per hour. Return whether the input boat can navigate the given river velocity. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and grab these. Oops. And let's grab this as well. Right, and so and let's also in detention. This. Right, so rowboats have to stay under 3 miles per hour, sailboats less than 7 miles per hour, ships less than 15 miles per hour. All right, and so we're going to get 2 inputs for our parameters. All right, so a number, speed of water, and a string type of boat. All right, so return, we're going to return a Boolean, right? So true or false. Can ship navigate water speed? right? Examples, see below, and then pseudocode. All right. So my first thought on this has any, so if you've already solved it, no need to respond, but does anyone have a thought of maybe how we can organize our data here?
Well, it looks like you're definitely gonna need like a if else statement somewhere in there.
What else? What else might we need? Right. What does this look a lot like?
Would you declare all those as variables inside the function?
Sort of. I think Shaquille nailed it in the chat, an object. Right. So if I type it like this, right? So we can put that inside of an object, right? And we could do one for rowboat and sailboat. All right, so object to store key value pairs. All right, and so I think that's a good start. So if we take our pseudocode bullet points here, right? So we could say build an object that stores KVP of boat speed. Access that with the boat parameter. And then compare the speed against the value in the object, which represents the speed which the boat will crash. And then if boat can safely navigate, return true, else return false. So does that sound like a solid plan? Okay, yep. So Jason, good call there. So we see here that this last example has some weird casing in it here. So how can we take a stab at handling case?
You can make it so the return, you can either do like 2 uppercase or 2 lowercase. So it returns it all in one case setting.
Yep. So make sure we send all incoming or all received boat parameters to lowercase to compare against the object. All right, so I feel pretty good about this to get a start. So let's go ahead and say let max speeds for boats equal this, and we'll say rowboat. Well, I'm pretty sure I can just leave it. This rowboat is 2, or I'm sorry, is 3. Sailboat 7, ships 15. All right. Rowboat. Okay, and they're sending it all in as one word. Sailboat 7 and ship is 15. All right, so now we could, so that we've got that, so we could do, let's make sure that we get what we think we are. All right, so first off, let's do console.log velocity and boat type. Right, so there's those. And let's go ahead and console.log max speed for boats. Right, so there's that. And it's just printing out ones for each of those. And let's go ahead and add a key of this. So we could do, we'll do it this way for right now. All right, so there's that. And then if we swap this out and make it dynamic so that we're getting our actual boat type. So we get 337 because we're not getting anything from here. And so let's also do this. All right, so we get a couple of undefines in there now. All right, so what we can do is take boat type to lowercase. All right, so now we're getting all of our values. All right, so what we need to do now is compare it against our velocities. All right, and so we can get rid of the console.log and we can say, well, actually, we'll leave that here for right now. And we can say that is less than velocity. Right, so now we're saying, what is the value? So with this, with the using the boat type fed in as the key inside our object to lowercase, and we're going to say, is this less than the velocity provided? Right, and so this is true, this is false, this is true, this should be false, this should be true, and this should be false. All right, so we got a whole bunch of falses and okay, no problem, Jason. So let's see here. So what did we do wrong here? Or should I say, what did I do wrong? So I've got a bunch of falses. So let's go ahead and do this one first, and let's just take a look at this. Right, I get false. So is this lower? All right, so let's take a look at this. And I'm sorry, no, that should. So Amanda, we did two lowercase to handle different cases that come in. So even if someone types in sailboat or ship with uppercase letters in there, we need to compare it directly against that. And so we just send everything to lowercase because our keys are lowercase. If we typed our keys in all uppercase, then we could send everything we receive to uppercase. All right, so let's see here. So max speed for boats is this. And let's do console.log velocity. Let's comment this out here real quick. All right, so max speed for boats is 3. And we're saying, is max speed for boats 3 less than velocity, right? So we do have this backwards, right? So we want to see if velocity is less than max speed for boat. So let's go ahead and reverse the polarity on that. So, and again, this is something that I want to point out, right? Like if you were in an interview and you screwed something like this up, that isn't the end of the interview, right? Like everyone's going to make mistakes like this. They just want to see if one, can you fight your way out of it? But two, and what I'm doing right now, right? Like I could teach class by sitting here silently, just typing all of this out, right? Like, but you're hearing me talk basically my thoughts as I'm going through this. And so, and again, as someone who does interviews for people that are applying for a job where I work, that is one of the things that we talk about is like, how well do you collaborate? How well do you communicate while you're writing code? Because when I put people into pairing sessions to solve challenges, like I don't want people to sit there silently just kind of working on their own. Like I want everyone to communicate with each other, share ideas, help each other out. And so that's a big part of why I do this all out loud, and I do things over and over again. I solve it multiple ways. I don't just jump to the best solution. There's some times where I will screw things up on purpose, right? Just so that I illustrate it. There'll be other times where I reverse the polarity on my logic on accident and I screw things up. Like I didn't do that on purpose to teach anyone a lesson. That's my bad. All right, so that's true. And so let's go ahead with this one. All right, so that's false. That's what we're looking for. This, I would hope would be true. So that's true. That's false. Uh-oh.
Charles broke the internet.
Not the first time. There we go. All right, so that's false. That's true. And that's false. So now I have a working answer. All right, so next step would be here. And then instead of being a console.log, all I'd have to do is turn this into a return. Right, and I don't even at this point need to add like a ternary where it's this and say true, false. I can do that. Oops. Oh, none of these are console.logged. Sorry. So I'll do that for the solution, but with only 5 minutes left, well, I'll wrap the first one, but I'm not going to wrap all of them. All right, so there's our true. If I change that to 5, all right, we get false. And same thing here, when you add so just like when we were working on the second night where we had to make change, and by adding a plus sign in front of our string number, right, that turned it, this forces JS to evaluate your string as a number when you have a conditional operator, right? So equals equals equals, greater than, less than, etc. You force the JS to look at the statement as a Boolean, right? So I don't need this true false here. I mean, you can have it, doesn't hurt anything, but when I do this, I still get false. And if I change that back to 2, I get true, right? And All right, true, false, true, false, true, false.
Hey, what you hitting for that?
For the multi-type,
Yeah.
right? And so you have to be careful with your multi-select because it will grab anything that is unique. And so you can see as I grab things, right, where it's highlighting it other places, that's showing you where else it would multi-select at. So like if I would have just grabbed this and then tried to get a new cursor so that I could have typed console.log, it's actually grabbing all of these. Right, and so I get twice as much as what I expected. So the first unique sequence was the opening parens and that C. And then I can hit home. Right, and then escape to exit. All right, so it is 9 p.m. 2100 Central Time. Hopefully this was a good class for everyone. This was session 5. We'll be back in session tomorrow night at 1800 or 6 p.m. Central Time. Were there any questions that anyone wanted to ask in the recording for posterity before I stop the recording? All right, going once, going twice. I'm going to turn off the recording.